has been made clear to me that it is very important that on a regular basis, henceforth, I establish sort of a journalistic approach to a blog that is publicly available and generated on a regular basis, in real time. So, like, produce it on the same day, post it, come up with a scheduled daily posting, autobiographical, establish my state of mind, and of course that I have and never have had any ideations of harming myself or anyone else. My sole goal, really, in life, is the realization of a more just and equitable society, in some degree to satisfy fucking empathy. It literally pains me to see people suffer, so it makes it very difficult to witness so much of it. Plus, especially suffering that is just unnecessary and arbitrarily being applied onto individuals, mostly at this juncture to satisfy someone's ego or their, bizarre greed or their appetites for whatever that makes them feel greater than whoever. This culture is largely to blame for the greater instance of corruption. The media is the message. Problem. If anyone's aware of that quote, I hope. Yeah, it's that can be applied to social media, and I would encourage anyone to familiarize themselves with the meta subpoenas and really all of the subpoenas that were going on during the COVID crisis regarding these major tech companies, Google, Meta, so Facebook and Instagram. At that time, Twitter, which was undergoing its transfer of ownership from, Jack Dorsey to Elon Musk, majority holdings. And it went through Apple, Alphabet, so Google, and I never got into it, but I'm pretty sure that they went through, they ended up going through TikTok. But in that, you realize that the concept of the media is the message is very relevant in regards to social media, as social media has been at this juncture designed to encourage this, and it's the echo chamber, but it's beyond just the echo chamber, because the algorithm doesn't just reinforce what you have already, established as an opinion or established as your milieu, your demographic. The algorithm actually guides your sort of development of opinion, especially if it senses that there are key triggers that suggest that you have not yet developed an opinion, and in those instances it's going to then suggest to you opinions that will, reinforce its marketing value, so it's going to benefit at this season it will almost certainly be benefiting a political donor in some way. That will be look into Cambridge Analytica. Essentially now Cambridge Analytica, that data modeling has been largely married into the extant meta modeling structure, which is a very, very powerful structure for electing officials. And more than electing officials, it's incredibly powerful at suppressing the electorate. More than anything else, suppressing the electorate specifically to harm a demographic, a majority demographic, to the benefit of a minority demographic. Oh my gosh, there's a really great series of examples. Sri Lanka, which the Sri Lanka election, Cambridge Analytica became major contractor and consultant. Oh my gosh, what was it's hard for me to remember these parties. I mean, I'm going through so many documents. Then where was the other one? Oh my gosh, there's one in South America. Was it? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Not Trinidad and Tobago, was it? Look these up. Just look at Cambridge Analytica. I mean, these are things that you really should be aware of. This is very, very important to your personal life in the sense that, you should be aware of the machinations that are pulling the strings of your personal life right now. I mean, in the sense that so many Americans spend so much time on their smartphones, and of the individuals that spend a large amount of time on their smartphones, they are disproportionately spending time on some platforms, social media. Usually people particularly engage with one or two, and then they'll have secondary social media applications, which is fine. That's not an issue. The problem is when, the social media is being exploited and weaponized against you, and, that's, in the case of Meta, really all of the time. Not that much of an alarmist. It really is ultimately the user's responsibility more than anything else to recognize that they are being duped. But the problem is when you have dominance of information, and then when you create an echo chamber, then you also then change the way even Google will serve up information. So Google now, instead of prioritizing information based on its credibility and general acceptance, it's actually almost exclusively based on the, information silo. So if you're using your Google account, it's going to take into consideration demographic elements, but it's also going to then lean them and skew them in a generally biased direction, and biased to advantage really Google's overall platform and legislative agenda. I mean broadly, or its marketing agenda. Anyone who thinks that Google is anything but a terrible freaking entity, you should look into the look at what Google was able to do in the California legislature regarding the privacy of emails. Essentially, they just lied to the legislature, and that's held precedence. And so Google has the legal authority to read all of your everything forever. Anything that you've done using any Google product they theoretically could, they couldn't copyright it, but they can definitely, they can't copyright it, but they can read it, essentially. So the analogy was that it would be read and the data would be mined and extracted, but then the actual text itself would be destroyed. Which you can say, actually, it's like saying, all right, I wrote, let's say I wrote a 2-sentence email that said, I love ya, have a nice day. And then what it's going to get out of that is just, you get what I'm saying, it's going to keep key words like love. You is probably not relevant. That probably actually would be replaced with a pronoun because of the subject or the to field. So essentially, all of this is then being mined and then held into both a database on your person, to understand how you behave and how to exploit you individually, but then also it's fed into demographics. So it can extract certain data from all of these emails to know exactly how to sell you, know when to sell you, and things like that. But it gets even more insidious when we talk about elections, and then it gets even more and more insidious, I think. When you talk about exploiting people when you talk about exploiting access to information in order to exploit people spiritually, in order to exploit people financially, in order to exploit people sexually, which is just the most aristocratic thing. I mean, it's the Richelieu, gosh, a tale as old as time. It's so fucking sick. So I suppose I understand greed to a certain degree, but the thing is about it is that ultimately you need to either see that if you have a perpetual sense of greed, right, or really any sense of greed is never going to be satiated. It's ultimately an extension of ego, so there's a sense of self unsatisfaction, right? The reason that you're greedy, if you are greedy. Now, there's a difference between greed and seeking to satisfy your needs and seeking to have a reasonable quality of life. There's nothing wrong with wanting to have a decent, quality of life. That's different than amassing wealth at the to the injury and detriment of others, amassing wealth, through the deceit of others, amassing wealth directly through theft or fraud schemes, whether illegal or legal. All these things, are so advantaged in our society right now, and excused in so many different ways. But I guess it's sad to see because like that implies such a lack of self-actualization. That greed implies such a deep lack of self-actualization that I pity that action. The entire society suffers because of that. Really, it's childlike. It's the id. It's the id run wild. Like the level of greed, and it's really just the need to have a sense of superiority has run so crazy amok that the entirety of society is suffering. Everyone is suffering. I mean, so many people are complaining about the homeless. Oh, they're shitting in it. They're pissing. It's spit. If we give them houses, they will not shit and piss on the fucking street. It's that simple. And it's not that expensive. It costs more to continue to incarcerate homeless people. But the thing is, it's easier to embezzle from a system that continues to incarcerate and rehabilitate, revolving door, revolving door, revolving door. If you create if you house these people, then they'll no longer have as extreme of mental problems. They won't be as easily exploitable. They'll vote, which will also be detrimental to the overall thing. Like, I want to realize a society that humanity deserves, which is one which doesn't really punish people, or look down on them because of their born class. That would be yeah. And I actually think there's nothing wrong with advantaging people and continuing the monetary system, but developing a much more robust and logical social safety net. I mean, I guarantee that it would be very easy to realize housing for all of the homeless citizens of the United States, prioritizing the veterans for an amount of money that would pale in the cost of their incarceration. And so and this is pretty well established. This isn't actually, if you're thinking this is wild thinking, then you really need to look into the way that the homelessness problem is currently dealt with, which is through incarceration, which is, it's a means of hiding the total number of homeless ultimately from you, and embezzling from the homeless problem without solving it. So, yeah, ultimately, spending 100,000-ish, depending on the location, it could be as low as 20-ish, 3-ish thousand, I think, up to 100-ish thousand to house a homeless person in a county jail, when their only crime is usually it's going to be sleeping, ultimately, which is something that people have to do, or pissing or shitting, which is what you have to do, essentially, and then these eviction schemes and, lawfare to make people homeless is essentially making these people themselves illegal. I mean, they're very active living illegal. It's a form of genocide, and I hope that you smash that like button and all that other bullshit, because I guess it's I've been informed that it is